Welcome to The Debate. So, in 2022, a 28-year-old man was forced to sell his entire life's work. We're talking 15 years of exhaustive labor and global chart-topping hits.
Right, for $200 million.
Exactly. $200 million. Now, that is a massive sum of money, but this wasn't a savvy business pivot or a strategic retirement.
No, it was a desperation move.
Right, to avoid sheer financial ruin. And that man wasn't a failed tech founder or like a reckless Wall Street trader. It was Justin Bieber, arguably one of the most successful pop artists in human history.
It really is, it's a staggering reality check, honestly. And it forces us to look past the gleaming surface of global superstardom. Today, we are dissecting a trajectory that began with a prodigious once-in-a-generation talent and culminated in public controversies, immense personal struggles, and the systemic dismantling of an empire.
And the core of our disagreement today really comes down to accountability. I hold the position that Justin Bieber's trajectory is, at its root, a tragedy of systemic child exploitation. This is a story where the music industry, his management, and the media treated a developing, highly vulnerable child as a disposable money-printing machine.
And while I absolutely acknowledge that his early environment was a high-pressure cooker, my position is that his eventual downfall was driven by his own lack of discipline, his profound financial irresponsibility, and deeply toxic interpersonal choices as an adult.
The derailment we witnessed wasn't a failure of his character, though. It was a feature of an entirely exploitative ecosystem.
Well, I'd argue the ecosystem he grew up in was an accelerant, certainly, but the catastrophic derailment of his life was ultimately an act of his own agency.
To truly understand how this ecosystem functioned, we have to look at the extreme vulnerability of his origins. I mean, we aren't talking about a privileged child who was carefully groomed for stardom with a safety net waiting for him.
Right. There was no safety net.
Exactly. Justin was raised by a single mother, Patty Millett, who was working low-paying jobs in Ontario just to survive after his father, Jeremy, left. And his father wasn't just absent, he was an abusive, drug-addicted presence in their early lives.
Wow.
Yeah. For young Justin, music was an escape mechanism. He was naturally, almost unbelievably gifted, playing miniature plastic drums brilliantly at just 2 or 3 years old.
And by 10, he was busking on the streets, right?
Busking just to help his mother make ends meet.
The raw talent is undeniable. I mean, his origin story is remarkable precisely because it relies on pure, unfiltered musical ability rather than industry connections.
Exactly, but that pure ability was co-opted the very second his 2007 Stratford Star performance of Neo's So Sick went viral on his mother's YouTube channel. He was just 12 years old.
Right, the Kid Roll channel?
Yes. Enter Scooter Braun and Usher, who signed him to the Raymond Braun Media Group at age 13. This wasn't mentorship, it was predatory extraction. To understand the sheer physical and psychological toll of this contract, look at what happened when he turned 16.
The My World Tour.
Yeah. At 16, they forced him into a 127-stage world tour. Think about the neurological development of a 16-year-old for a moment. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, emotional regulation, and long-term planning, is years away from being fully formed.
Sure, I agree the schedule was punishing.
Punishing is an understatement. Yet we are asking this undeveloped brain to manage the economic output and pressure of a multinational corporation. It is quite literally like trying to upgrade the operating system on a server while it's actively processing 1 billion transactions a second.
That's a really interesting analogy.
There is no downtime. There is no opportunity to take the system offline to, install basic adult coping mechanisms or achieve normal developmental milestones. You cannot subject a 16-year-old brain to 127 stadium shows, continuous travel, and relentless performance, and expect a highly functional, well-adjusted adult to magically emerge on the other side.
Right. I like the server analogy. I really do. But we have to recognize that overloaded servers don't eventually start driving Lamborghinis under the influence of marijuana. Well, I hear you on the grueling nature of that initial launch, but we cannot indefinitely suspend a person's accountability because they had a difficult start. We have to draw a line where the exploited child ends and the autonomous adult begins.
I think that line is much blurrier than you're suggesting.
Look, I know people listening to this might be rolling their eyes a bit right now. It is incredibly hard to feel sympathy for a multimillionaire acting out from the back of a luxury car. But if we strip away the wealth, we are left looking at a young adult who fundamentally believed the rules of society simply did not apply to him.
You're pointing toward the 2014 period.
Yes, the infamous 2014 crime spree across Miami, Toronto, and Los Angeles. In Miami, he was arrested for a DUI, driving a rented Lamborghini with an expired license and marijuana in his system.
Right.
In Toronto, he crashed an ATV into a minivan. And then there was the deeply malicious egging of his neighbor's house in LA, which wasn't just a teenage prank. It resulted in a police raid where drugs were uncovered and he was sentenced to community service.
It was a chaotic time, undeniably.
It's a phenomenon we could call financial infantilization. When you have hundreds of millions of dollars at your disposal, money becomes an endless buffer against reality. You never experience natural friction. You never face the immediate consequences of a bad decision because you can literally buy your way out of it.
I see why you look at it that way, but
And we see this culminate in his absolute financial mismanagement, selling a 15-year music catalog just to sustain a lifestyle of private jets, exotic cars, and luxury villas. Isn't an industry exploiting a victim. It is a man exploiting his own legacy for instant gratification.
But we have to ask why there was such a desperate, relentless need for instant gratification. You look at 2014 and see a spoiled adult shielded by wealth. I look at the exact same timeline and see the inevitable textbook manifestation of untreated complex trauma.
Untreated trauma?
Let's dig into the genesis of this behavioral spiral. You mentioned the marijuana in Miami. We know from his own subsequent admissions that the pressure of holding up this massive economic machine was so crushing that he started smoking joints at age 13 just to cope.
13. Wow.
Yeah. A 13-year-old self-medicating to survive the demands placed on him by adults is a profound indictment of his environment. How can we expect a well-adjusted adult when the foundation is entirely warped?
Self-medicating is one thing, and it is tragic. But by 2012, the behavior is metastasizing into something far more aggressive and outward-facing. We see physical altercations with the paparazzi.
Well, paparazzi are inherently aggressive.
True, but we also see a young man casually hurling racial slurs on camera, which required a massive public apology because it revealed a disturbing level of racial insensitivity and arrogance.
He was young.
We even have the surreal incident in Germany, where he illegally imports a pet monkey and then simply abandons it when he realizes he doesn't have the proper paperwork. The psychological mechanism there isn't just trauma. It is an unchecked ego that has completely detached from the reality the rest of us live in.
He detached from reality because the reality he was forced to live in was fundamentally unnatural. Let's unpack the paparazzi altercations, for instance.
Okay.
When you are stalked day and night by aggressive adults wielding cameras, shouting provocations to get a profitable reaction out of you, lashing out isn't an ego trip. It is a primal biological fight-or-flight response. Your nervous system doesn't know you're famous, it just knows you were being hunted.
I understand the stress of that, but
Let me share a specific, heartbreaking detail from that first world tour. He famously took his own passport and hid it.
wait, really?
Yes. Why?
Because he didn't want to go to the next city. He just wanted to force the adults around him to stop the machine so he could have a few days of a normal childhood back in Canada. When an animal is backed into a corner by predators, it bites. The adult in his life built a golden cage, and then we acted shocked when he started rattling the bars.
That's a compelling argument, and I hear the trauma argument, I really do. But have you considered that experiencing harm does not excuse inflicting it? We have to apply some moral consistency here.
What do you mean by inflicting it?
Being exploited by management or stalked by paparazzi does not give you a free pass to become a perpetrator of emotional destruction in your private life. Let's assume for a moment that he was entirely a victim of the media and his handlers. That still does not justify his deeply toxic relationship dynamics, specifically with Selena Gomez, from 2010 to 2018. I think we have to define what we mean by toxic in this context.
I mean, a masterclass in relational volatility. This wasn't just young love gone wrong.
There were intense, highly public mutual cheating allegations. Bieber publicly accused Gomez of cheating with Zayn Malik, effectively weaponizing his massive audience against her.
It was a very public, very messy relationship for both of them.
It was. Furthermore, Selena Gomez herself has made claims of enduring emotional abuse during their time together. The environment might have been chaotic, but he learned how to manipulate, and he deployed those skills against the people closest to him. He wasn't just a victim, he actively victimized others.
Before we judge how he treated others, we have to examine how his own bodily autonomy and emotional boundaries were treated by the world. It wasn't just his management, it was the entire culture.
Are you referring to the media appearances?
Yes. We have to look at the severe, completely normalized sexual harassment he faced from adults in the industry. If we want to understand why his compass for healthy intimacy was so fractured, look at how the public accepted that this boy's body was essentially public property.
That's a strong accusation.
But it's true. Award shows, interviews, live events, the list is staggering, and it illustrates a clear psychological mechanism. In 2010, during a radio interview, he was subjected to highly inappropriate sexual questions as a minor. At a live event in London, he was groped by the adult host.
Oh, wow.
We saw a 27-year-old Katy Perry aggressively grabbing an 18-year-old Bieber. At the 2012 AMAs, Jenny McCarthy forcibly kissed him without his consent, an incident he explicitly stated later made him feel violated.
Right, I remember that.
And perhaps most egregiously, in 2015, Ellen DeGeneres displayed his leaked nude photos on national television for a laugh, interrogating him about who the woman in the photo was.
Yeah, that was definitely a different era of television.
If any of this had happened to a young female pop star, the industry would have been brought to its knees. But because he was a boy, it was treated as a punchline. If your entire adolescence is defined by adults violating your physical boundaries for entertainment, and the whole world laughs and applauds, you do not learn what a healthy boundary looks like. The concept of deep emotional respect is alien to you because you've never been afforded it.
That is a powerful explanation for his vulnerability, I'll give you that. But you are drawing a straight, deterministic line from industry harassment to his own interpersonal abuse, and that essentially strips him of all moral agency as an adult.
I don't think it strips him of agency. It contextualizes it.
It suggests he is just a passive vessel for trauma. By the time we reach his mid-20s, the pattern of retaliation and vindictiveness is entirely his own calculation. Let's look at his marriage to Hailey Baldwin in 2018.
A relationship that has actually provided him with a significant amount of stability recently.
Perhaps in the present day, but let's look at the genesis of that decision. The evidence strongly suggests a highly calculated toxic foundation. Hailey had been in his orbit, essentially following his movements, since her father, Stephen Baldwin, introduced them back in 2009.
They knew each other for a long time, yes.
Right. Bieber's sudden marriage to her in 2018, at age 24, was heavily criticized, and rightfully so, as a vindictive maneuver designed purely to exact revenge on Selena Gomez. It was a calculated strike to make his ex-partner realize his value after their final breakup.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're ignoring the immense psychological toll of his isolation.
But using a marriage, using another human being as a weapon to inflict pain on an ex-partner proves a level of emotional immaturity and toxic decision-making that you cannot lay at the feet of Scooter Braun or the paparazzi. That is the hallmark of someone who treats other people as pawns in his own emotional games.
I fundamentally reject the premise that his mid-20s were defined by calculated malice. You are interpreting his actions through the lens of a healthy, strategic mind playing Machiavellian chess.
The timing of it all is hard to ignore.
But the reality is that this was a period of profound psychiatric crisis. This is a man who was suffering from such severe depression and suicidal ideation that his internal world was literally collapsing under the weight of his existence. It led to the complete cancellation of the 2016 Purpose Tour.
True, the cancellation was a major turning point.
When you are drowning in severe clinical depression, your judgment and emotional regulation are severely compromised. It isn't a calculated strike. It's a desperate flailing for a life raft. And more importantly, when we look at how he handles genuine, unavoidable adversity as he matures into a fully realized adult, we actually see immense character.
Where exactly do we see this character?
Let's look at 2022. He is diagnosed with type 2 Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. Half of his face is completely paralyzed. For a global pop star whose entire brand, marketability, and self-worth have been intimately tied to his physical appearance since he was a child, this is a career-ending, identity-shattering nightmare.
It was a very serious diagnosis.
What did he do? He didn't spiral into substance abuse. He didn't lash out at the media or throw a tantrum. He faced it head-on. He showed incredible, quiet resilience, returning to perform at the Rock in Rio Festival a mere 40 days after announcing his condition to the world.
40 days is fast.
Very fast. And let's not forget, in 2023, he finally separated from Scooter Braun after 18 years. That is the definitive act of a man taking control of his life, breaking the cycle, and refusing to be a perpetual victim.
I will absolutely grant that his handling of the Ramsay-Hunt diagnosis demonstrated a fortitude that was entirely absent in his earlier years. Getting back on a stage in 40 days with partial facial paralysis requires a level of genuine grit.
Exactly.
But separating from your manager at age 29 after you've already had to liquidate your life's work for $200 million because you financed a decade of excess, that isn't necessarily a triumph of character.
I think it's unfair to call it his own digging.
Well, the financial ruin, the pattern of illegal acts, the racial insensitivity, the weaponization of his romantic choices, these are the indisputable results of a fundamental lack of discipline. The environment was the accelerant, yes, but he held the matches and he held the steering wheel.
And I look at that exact same timeline and I see the direct, textbook symptoms of an industry that strip-mined a prodigious 13-year-old child. The underage substance abuse, the relational volatility, the financial illiteracy. These are the mechanical outputs of a system that squeezed every conceivable ounce of profit from his raw talent.
So the system is entirely to blame?
They deliberately denied him normal neurological and emotional development and failed utterly to provide a moral or psychological framework. You cannot design a maze explicitly to disorient someone, blindfold them, and then blame them for continuously walking into the walls.
It seems we are looking at two very different interpretations of where the system ends and the self begins. But I think where we fundamentally agree is that Justin Bieber's story serves as a profound cautionary tale.
Without a doubt, it is arguably the most visible psychological experiment of our era.
It really is the ultimate case study on the intersection of immense natural talent, unimaginable wealth, and the incredibly dangerous psychological impacts of global fame thrust upon a young mind. It shows us what happens when an individual is given total economic power but zero developmental boundaries.
It really does. Separating the child victim from the accountable adult is an incredibly complex task, and there is so much more depth to explore in this material. Today, Justin Bieber is in his 30s, navigating life outside the machine that built him, and recently becoming a father in August of 2024.
A huge milestone.
Huge. The foundation of his life was undeniably poured under impossible conditions, and the structural cracks were televised for the entire world to judge. But perhaps the most fascinating part of the story isn't the collapse itself. It's the profound question of whether after the dust settles and the cameras finally pull back, a person can actually rebuild their own foundation from the rubble.